When the fine showed up taped to my front door in a plastic sleeve, I already knew who sent it: Loretta Granger, the HOA president with the personality of a malfunctioning blender. Loud, unpredictable, and impossible to ignore. You could hear her heels clacking down the sidewalk like a warning siren before she even rang your bell. This time, it was my fence gate. I'd just replaced the old, warped wooden gate on the side of my house. It had been sagging for months. I finally had a weekend off from the firehouse, so I installed a new vinyl gate, clean, white, and solid. Looked good, worked better. But apparently it violated the community aesthetic regulations. The fine, $350, with a typed notice that said, "Unapproved gate design. Not compliant with HOA regulations. Must be removed or replaced within 15 days. I crumpled the paper and tossed it in the bin. I wasn't about to pay a dime without digging deeper. I'd been living in this neighborhood for 6 years, long enough to know Loretta loved interpreting the rules however it suited her. She once fined my neighbor for having excessively expressive Halloween inflatables. The guy had 3 pumpkins and a skeleton. I walked over to the HOA office the next morning. It's a tiny room attached to the clubhouse, barely big enough for 2 chairs and Loretta's ego. She was already there, hunched behind her desk, filing her nails like she was prepping for battle. "Morning, Loretta," I said, stepping in and holding up the notice. "You mind telling me what's wrong with my gate?" She didn't even look up. "It's not the approved model. It disrupts the uniform look of the community." "Right," I nodded. "And where exactly is this approved model listed?" "It's in the handbook. Section 7, subheader C." I pulled the handbook from my backpack. She blinked. I'd highlighted and tabbed the entire thing last year when she tried to ban pickup trucks from overnight parking. I flipped to Section 7. "This one?" I pointed. "Says here the approved gate is a white vinyl, vertical slats, no arch, no design. That sound familiar?" She narrowed her eyes. "That's correct." "Good. That's exactly what I installed. In fact, I even called the manufacturer listed in the handbook. Ordered it straight from them. Model number matches." Loretta stiffened. "Well, I'll have to verify that." "You do that," I said. "In the meantime, I'm not paying your fine, and I'm not replacing the gate. Unless you want to admit you fined me for installing the exact gate you require." She didn't say another word. I walked out. 2 days later, I got another notice. This time, it wasn't about the gate. She'd reported me for unauthorized structural modifications to the lawn edging. The war had just begun. By the time the second notice showed up, this one accusing me of unauthorized structural modifications to the lawn edging, I knew Loretta wasn't just reacting. She was retaliating. There was no way she could have even seen the lawn edging unless she'd walked directly onto my property. That was my first red flag, the edging in question. A simple brick border I'd installed 3 years ago, same bricks they sell at every home improvement store. Low profile, barely 6 inches high, and they'd been there long enough to gather moss. No one had ever said a word about them, not even Loretta, until now. I didn't bother going back to her office. Instead, I took a different route. My buddy Eric, a former military police officer turned building inspector, lived 3 houses down. He'd had his own run-in with the HOA when Loretta tried to force him to paint over his American flag mural on his backyard fence. We'd bonded over beers and stories of her creative interpretation of authority. When I showed him the new notice, he didn't even blink. "She's fishing," he said, flipping the paper over. "Thing is, if she's stepping onto your property without notice or consent, that's trespassing. Especially if she's documenting things to use against you, that's unlawful surveillance." "I figured as much," I said. "She's not even subtle about it." He leaned back in his chair. "You got cameras. Just one on the front porch. Install more. One on the side gate, one facing your yard, one covering the back. If she sets foot on your property again, you'll have all the evidence you need." I spent the next evening wiring up 3 motion-activated cameras. They fed into a cloud storage system I could access from my phone. The following morning, I checked the footage. At 2:46 a.m., Loretta, in a bathrobe and slippers, tiptoed through my side yard, flashlight in hand. She paused by the edging, crouched down, took photos with her phone, and continued around the back before exiting through my side gate. I downloaded the footage, clipped it to a USB, and headed to the county sheriff's substation. Trespassing was one thing. Doing it at night with no notice and documenting residents' private property without consent, that was something else entirely. Deputy Morales took one look at the footage and frowned. "She's not law enforcement. She has no right to be on your property at that hour, especially not uninvited," he said. "You want to file charges? I want it documented. If she does it again, I'll press charges." "For now, I just want her to know I'm not playing along," Morales nodded. "We've had a couple complaints about that HOA before. You're not the first." Back home, I printed a single-page letter and taped it to my front door. "To whom it may concern, this property is under 24-hour video surveillance. Unauthorized entry will be reported to law enforcement. Surveillance footage is being archived for legal use." I didn't need to name names. Loretta would know. 3 days later, I got a third notice. Improper storage of refuse bins. Violation of Section 4, Paragraph B. It was absurd. My bins were behind a wooden screen enclosure at the side of the house, invisible from the street, just like the HOA guidelines required. This one wasn't even about the bins. It was about control. I'd had enough. I filed a formal complaint with the city's Zoning and Housing Compliance Board. I included the video of her trespassing, copies of the notices, and photographs of the areas she claimed were in violation. I added a copy of the HOA's own handbook with the relevant rules highlighted. I also included a brief statement pointing out that Loretta had no legal authority to conduct property inspections unannounced, especially not at night. Then I took it a step further. Using the city's public records portal, I searched for the HOA's articles of incorporation and annual filings. What I found made my stomach turn. The HOA hadn't submitted its required financial disclosures for over 2 years. According to city code, failure to do so technically invalidated their authority to collect fines. Without proper filings, they were operating in violation of state nonprofit regulations. I called a friend from college, Dana, who'd gone on to become a real estate attorney. She specialized in property law and had handled several HOA disputes for clients across the state. When I told her what I'd found, she paused. "If they haven't filed their financials, they're in breach of their own bylaws. That gives you standing to challenge their authority in civil court. You could file a motion to force a temporary cease and desist on all HOA actions until their compliance is reviewed." Would that hold up? Easily. Especially if they're issuing fines while being out of compliance. Courts don't take kindly to that. Together, we drafted a formal cease and desist letter. Dana filed it through her law office, attaching all the documentation. It was delivered via certified mail to the HOA's registered address, which, of course, was Loretta's home. I didn't hear anything for 4 days. Then, on a sunny Saturday morning, the HOA called an emergency meeting. It was held on the clubhouse lawn, folding chairs hastily arranged in rows. I arrived early and sat in the front, USB drive in my pocket, printed documents in a folder. Loretta stood at the makeshift podium, flanked by 2 of the board members, Doug, the spineless treasurer, and Janine, the secretary who rarely looked up from her knitting. She cleared her throat, clearly rattled. "We've received some concerning allegations regarding the recent issuance of fines and the HOA's current administrative standing. As such, we've temporarily suspended all enforcement actions while we conduct an internal audit." Murmurs broke out across the crowd. A few neighbors looked over at me. I didn't say a word. Loretta's voice wavered. "We assure all residents that the HOA remains committed to upholding the integrity of our community and resolving any misunderstandings." That's when I stood up. "I've got copies of the financial non-compliance, the trespassing footage, and a legal notice from my attorney. If anyone else here has been fined unfairly, I'd be happy to help you file a joint complaint." A few people clapped. Others just looked stunned. Loretta's face went pale. Doug whispered something to her, and she stepped back from the podium. I didn't need to say anything else. As the meeting broke up, neighbors approached me one by one. A retired schoolteacher named Gloria told me Loretta had fined her $400 for excessively luminous porch lighting. A young couple said she'd reported them for having more than 2 lawn ornaments. An elderly vet whispered that she once threatened to tow his car for parking at a non-standard angle. By sunset, we had a list of 14 residents with documented disputes. Dana agreed to represent all of us in a class action motion if it came to that. Loretta must have sensed the tide turning. The next morning, she hand-delivered a typed letter to my mailbox. No envelope, no signature. The HOA board has reviewed your concerns and determined that the recent fines issued to your property will be rescinded. No further action will be taken at this time. I showed it to Dana. She just nodded. She's trying to get ahead of it. But it's too late. The city's compliance office contacted me 2 days later. An investigator had been assigned to the HOA. They would be conducting a full audit. Loretta wasn't just frozen now, she was melting. The audit didn't take long to snowball. By the end of the second week, the city's compliance officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Tasha Ward, had been seen walking out of the HOA's clubhouse with 2 full boxes of documents. She didn't say anything when I passed her on the sidewalk, but the look she gave me was one of those silent acknowledgments, the kind that said, "You were right to call this in." The neighborhood had shifted. People were talking more. Not whispering, not complaining behind closed doors, but actually talking on porches, in driveways, during dog walks. Loretta's little empire had lost its grip. For the first time in years, folks weren't afraid to mow their lawns on their own schedules or hang wind chimes without submitting a color sample. But it wasn't over. One afternoon, I was replacing a loose hinge on my side gate when Gloria, the retired schoolteacher, walked up with a manila envelope in her hand and a look that said she'd just uncovered something foul. "You've got to see this," she said, holding the envelope like it might burn her fingers. Inside were photocopies of 3 checks, each made out to cash, each signed by Doug, the HOA treasurer, and each for over $5,000. The memo line on every one was blank. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "I was helping my niece clean out her garage," she said. She used to do the HOA's bookkeeping 3 years ago when she lived here. She found an old box of files she never returned. These were in the ledger. I stared at the checks. They weren't just sloppy, they were illegal. Nonprofits aren't allowed to issue checks to cash without documented expenses. It was embezzlement, plain and simple. I scanned them onto my computer, added them to the growing case file, and sent them to Tasha at the city office. Within 24 hours, a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit called for a statement. He asked about Loretta, about Doug, about their behavior during HOA meetings, about the fines, the gate, all of it. A week later, Doug vanished. His car disappeared from his driveway. His social media pages went dark. No one had seen him since the day the detective called me. Word got around that a subpoena had landed at his front door, and by the time anyone knocked again, he was already gone. Loretta, meanwhile, tried to rally. She sent out a frantic, typed letter claiming there had been irregularities in the board's financial oversight, and that the treasurer had acted independently without authorization. She blamed it all on Doug, like he'd gone rogue, and she was just the innocent bystander. But it didn't stick. The city issued a formal suspension of the HOA's enforcement authority. That meant no fines, no inspections, no new rules. They were under investigation, and until it was resolved, the board had no legal teeth. Then came the subpoenas. Loretta was served at her front door while watering her petunias. The deputy didn't flinch when she tried to shut the door in his face. He wedged his boot in the frame and handed her the envelope, calm as a lake. She stood there frozen, hose still running, water pooling at her feet. A week later, I was called to testify. The hearing took place in a county administrative courtroom, low ceilings, humming fluorescent lights, no nonsense. Tasha was there, along with 2 other investigators. Loretta, looking wilted and angular in a blazer far too big for her, sat beside a court-appointed attorney. She didn't meet my eyes once. The judge asked me about the gate first. I explained the installation, the model, the handbook specifications. Then I was asked about the fines, the trespassing, and the footage. I passed over a copy of the video, still framed and time-stamped. The judge watched it on a monitor. When Loretta appeared on screen, creeping through my yard with a flashlight, the room went quiet. When she squatted to photograph my lawn edging, the judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. "That's her?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. He looked at Loretta. She said nothing. Then came the financial records. Tasha handed over the check copies, the ledgers, and a short audit summary showing over $30,000 in undocumented withdrawals over 18 months, all signed off by Doug and never disclosed to the board or the residents. The judge didn't yell. He didn't need to. He simply nodded, made a few notes, and said, "This case is moving to the district attorney's office for further criminal review." Loretta's face drained of color. Outside the courtroom, I stepped into the sun and took a breath that felt like it had been waiting a year to leave my lungs. Gloria met me on the steps, along with Eric and 5 other neighbors who had shown up in quiet support. No one cheered. No one needed to. It was enough just to stand there and know we weren't alone anymore. 3 weeks passed. The HOA board was dissolved by court order. Loretta was barred from serving in any community leadership capacity for 10 years. Doug was picked up in another state and extradited back to face charges. Embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and unlawful surveillance were all on the docket. He took a plea deal. Loretta didn't. The new interim board was made up of volunteers people actually voted in by residents. Eric became treasurer. Gloria stepped in as secretary. A nurse named Felicia chaired the meetings. They rewrote the bylaws in plain language, eliminated the fine system, and replaced it with a community mediation process. No more secret votes, no more surprise notices, no more late-night inspections. The gate stayed up. No one asked me to change it. No one questioned its design. In fact, a few neighbors asked where I bought it, one even ordered the same model. Loretta's house went on the market a month after the ruling. No one said goodbye. She drove off early one morning, windows up, car full. A for sale sign sat crooked on her lawn by the afternoon. At the next community meeting, Felicia brought in donuts and coffee. People brought folding chairs and lingered long after it ended. Dogs wandered off leashes, kids played in the clubhouse yard, and no one looked over their shoulder. We weren't just rid of her, we were rebuilding. And this time, it wasn't about rules or fences or lawn edging. It was about trust and how to keep it. The neighborhood was finally breathing again, but not everyone had moved on. A few of Loretta's old allies, those who'd benefited quietly from her reign, still lingered around the edges. They didn't say much, but they didn't help with cleanup days or attend the new meetings either. They watched, and I had a feeling they were waiting for something. That something came by way of a brown envelope that showed up in my mailbox one muggy Thursday afternoon. It wasn't from the HOA, not the new one anyway. It was a notice from the county clerk's office. Inside was a copy of a pending civil suit, filed under Loretta's name. Apparently, Loretta wasn't content with criminal proceedings. In the suit, she claimed I had defamed her character by maliciously spreading false information leading to personal and professional reputational harm. She was seeking damages, real damages, $75,000. I read it twice, then set it down on the kitchen counter and stared at it. It was absurd. The information I'd shared, all of it was evidence-backed, submitted through legal channels, and had already led to charges and a court-ordered dissolution of her board. I called Dana. She didn't sound surprised when I read her the claim. "She's getting desperate," Dana said. "She's trying to make noise, maybe hoping to distract from the criminal case or scare you into a settlement. Can she even do that? She can file. Doesn't mean she'll win, but we'll counter. And if she pushes it, we'll file a motion to dismiss with prejudice. The discovery alone will bury her." I met Dana the next day at her office downtown. We drafted the formal response, attached all the certified documentation from the hearings, and included a motion to sanction her for frivolous litigation. Dana included a clause requesting that any further legal action she initiated without legal grounds should be subject to automatic dismissal and court fees. By the following Monday, the judge set a hearing. Loretta didn't show. Her court-appointed attorney did, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. After reviewing the documents, the judge dismissed the case in less than 10 minutes. He didn't just throw it out, he fined Loretta for abuse of process and referred the matter to the county's Civil Oversight Committee. That was her last official attempt, but something still didn't sit right. And it wasn't just Loretta. 2 weeks after the civil suit collapsed, Felicia, the new HOA chair, called me from her office at the hospital. She sounded worried. "I was going through the old HOA storage unit," she said, "and found a series of locked boxes. No keys, just old combination padlocks. The labels are handwritten vendor contracts, legal correspondence, and one just says board use only." I met her that evening at the unit, which was tucked behind a strip mall near the highway. Eric had brought bolt cutters, and we cracked the locks one by one. Inside the last bin, the one marked board use only, we found a pile of paper files, more checks, and a black flash drive taped to the underside of the lid. We plugged it into my laptop right there on the tailgate of Felicia's SUV. The files were a mix of scanned documents, emails, and audio files. The emails were between Loretta and a man named Vincent Ramirez, owner of a landscaping company that had held the HOA's exclusive groundskeeping contract for 5 years. According to the emails, Loretta had been receiving monthly kickbacks in exchange for approving inflated invoices. Vincent would bill the HOA for services never rendered, and Loretta would approve them without review, but the audio files, those were worse. We played one. Loretta's voice, unmistakable, said, "Just add the extra mulch line and I'll sign off. No one checks the line items anyway. I'll call Doug tonight and we'll get it paid by Monday." Another file had her laughing. "If these people knew what they were really paying for, they'd throw a fit, but they don't read the reports. They just complain about their hedges." Eric sat back and crossed his arms. "That's procurement fraud." Felicia nodded slowly. "And if she used HOA funds to pay those fake invoices, that's misappropriation. We're talking tens of thousands." Dana filed the new evidence with the district attorney's office the next morning. This time, the response was immediate. A formal investigation into Vincent's business was launched. Within days, his trucks disappeared from the neighborhood. Then came the warrants. Law enforcement raided Vincent's office and seized his books. A forensic audit revealed over $80,000 in fake billing tied to our HOA alone. But he hadn't stopped there. His name showed up on contracts with 4 other neighborhoods in the city. Loretta was brought back into custody and formally charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, felony misuse of community funds, and racketeering. She was denied bail. Vincent was arrested 2 days later while trying to board a flight to Arizona. Once the news broke, the neighborhood gathered in the clubhouse for what was supposed to be a routine evening meeting. It turned into something else entirely. Felicia stood at the front, the flash drive in her palm. "I want you all to know," she said, "this isn't just about what was stolen, it's about how it happened." Loretta depended on silence, on fear, on the assumption that no one would dig too deep. She looked at me, then at Gloria, then at Eric. But we did. And because of that, she's done. For the first time, the room didn't feel like a group of strangers forced to share a zip code. It felt like a community. The city later issued a formal commendation to the neighborhood for assisting in the fraud investigation. I didn't care much for the plaque. What mattered was the change. We used the recovered funds, every cent the city clawed back from the fraudulent contracts, to improve our own community. Not with aesthetics or gimmicks. We repaired cracked sidewalks, added lighting to the walking trails, built a small playground beside the clubhouse. Things people actually needed. We voted to cap future board terms at 2 years. No one could serve more than 2 terms in a row, and all budget decisions had to be approved by an open vote, not a whisper of protest. Loretta eventually took a plea deal, 10 years, no parole for the first 6. Vincent got 12. Doug, who'd already turned state's witness, received 5 with probation. Their names became shorthand for what we wanted to avoid: secrecy, exploitation, unchecked power. As for the gate, the one that started it all, it still stands. Never touched, never questioned again. But now, it's more than just a fence. It's a reminder that the smallest things, when challenged by the right people, can bring down the biggest lies. The neighborhood isn't perfect, but it's honest now, and that's more than we ever had before.